Welcome to the Nate KG podcast. I'm your host, Nate KG, and this is a show dedicated to exploring the nuances of jump rope, where I talk with jumpers of all skill levels, backgrounds, and fitness goals. Today, we're going to hear from my friend, Grim Leaper. You can find him on the socials at his pseudonym, Grim Leaper. Grim and I have known each other for several years now, since before COVID even. We've had loads of incredible conversations about jump rope, the sport, speed training, freestyle, etc. We also tend to heckle each other a bunch on social, which is hilarious. Always makes me laugh, so you'll definitely catch some of that in our conversation as well. As a heads up, there's loads of profanity in today's episode, so consider yourself warned. Grim and I chat about loads of topics, including his journey from recreational to competitive jumper, how to get yourself moving when you have low motivation, being open to all styles of jumping, a huge section dedicated to speed step training and how to start, and loads more. All of the show notes for this episode can be found over at natekg.com. And if you're a returning listener, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a quick second to leave a review for the show. It helps so much. Okay, ready to get started? So now please enjoy my conversation with Grim Leaper. Grim, we've talked many times through Instagram, through Discord, all these different places, and now we're finally sitting down and talking on the podcast. This is actually the first time I've even heard your voice. Welcome to the show, my man.
In person. What's up?
Oh man, there's so many ways we're gonna take this episode for sure. We're definitely gonna talk about speed a lot, but let's
Lots of winding roads.
Yes, and offshoots and tangents and random stuff.
Yes.
Let's switchbacks maybe. Let's start with where you're from and how you started jumping.
Right now I'm living in Twin Falls, Idaho, and I started jumping because a couple years before I started jumping, I had my last surgery out of like 20, and I just stopped doing all workouts, everything.
That's a lot of surgeries.
Yeah, like my body's just beat up. But after 2 years, like my body was actually hurting more, and I decided I needed to do something and get my ass off the couch. So I started researching things that I could do that weren't too aggressive on my body, but I'd still get my heart rate going, and just something to help me get back into shape.
Mm-hmm.
And I found jump rope.
What was where did you first hear about it? What were you first like reading or watching?
Well, first I saw, like, you see those random articles, jump rope is the best, and they don't tell you shit, dude. They tell you to just jump, and they really don't tell you shit. So I went and bought this cheap ass jump rope, and then I found a couple of shirtless dudes. Started figuring that out. Didn't see Chris in those, so that was disappointing. But I started doing a little bit of their stuff, and then, like me, I have an addictive personality, so I just started researching full blast into it. And then I found competitions, and Instagram helped a lot too. But even Instagram, when I first started jumping, there was like no information. There was just people doing average shit.
What year was this?
Cool. 2018.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, in 2018 it was a completely different landscape. Yeah. So you went in super deep and you found competitive jump rope, and then did you just hit it really hard with all things competition, or what was your focus then?
I'd say about 6 months in, after I kind of got like everything down with doubles and all that, and then I like really deep into competition. And so I started finding like YouTube videos of the world championships, and I fell in love like instantly. I was like, oh my God, how do you do that?
Why did you? Because some people, when they see that, it's just like intimidation, and it's like, oh man, like I could never reach that level. What about it, or what about you, made you want to go after that?
Because I don't think anyone can be held down if they allow themselves to push hard enough. Like I see that, I know it's possible. So the next step is figuring out how to start. And this is where the problem came in. I saw speed. I was like, holy shit, that is amazing. I want everything to do with that. Went and bought a fucking wired rope, and I hated it. Right away, I was like,
standard
a
like
bare
CrossFit
cable.
style.
Yeah.
Yeah, bare wire. Yep.
And I was like, this fucking sucks. Screw this. Like, I'm not gonna do this. I couldn't do anything. Like, I'd get 2 steps. I didn't have any form down. And then I remember, what was it? The jump and rope challenge.
Yep. Molly
Like
Metz.
back then, I thought it was incredible. Like 100, that's incredible. Like it isn't, but it kind of is when you're starting out. It's a good like baseline.
But that challenge was 100 doubles in 100 seconds. Is that what it was?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
100 doubles. It didn't matter the time,
Okay.
and then you do the 100 speed step. And that's the other thing. Like them doing that, they don't explain RFO unless you go into the
Right.
website
Right
and
foot
read
only.
into it.
Hmm.
Yeah, right foot only. Most people don't understand that. And I say it all the time just to annoy people, but I'm trying to be pretentious, like RFO, like I know what I'm talking about. But
A lot of people, I'm sure, have not yet been graced by your DMs. And just for some context, you are probably, at least in my experience, you are such a troll on purpose. But
oh,
it's not that. But you're not only a troll. You do it for the fun, but underneath that layer is a lot of extraordinarily good conversation, insight, critical thinking, all of that, which is why I wanted to have you on. And I'm sure even in this first 5 or 6 minutes here, people can already tell that you let it loose. But I love it. Let's I want to know a little bit more about um you're talking about speed step and right foot only, and there's this huge gap of knowledge between someone who
huge
starts for
gap.
fitness reasons like yourself and the competitive world.
And that's the beautiful thing about jump rope, dude, is there's so many different layers to it. But people tend to get stuck on one road and then they assume that their version is better, including myself. Like when I got into speed and all of that, like I used to think, like, man, these workout people are a joke. But then you start like looking at it at other people's point of view, and you're like, well, that makes sense. Not everyone wants to put their body through that. They just want something to get them up.
And to just have a little bit of fun, a hobby, to move around, heart rate up a little bit. But
Yeah,
like you're,
exactly.
and for that purpose, all of the things that would be not standard in competitive jump rope, aka like workouts with the jump rope, you don't
Yeah,
typically see that, or like shuffling or like footwork based things or very repetitive movements. You don't usually see that, but it's very useful and really good to always have as like a fallback. I think that that's something that competitive jumpers can learn a lot about or learn from as well. Speaking from my own personal experience, when you add in those types of repetitive movements that are easy in terms of the competitive context, it,
yeah.
it really does help on the days where you're not feeling it. It can help you get into the swing of things. It can help you just
Oh,
not
yeah.
set extremely high expectations for yourself 100% of the time. All of that.
Yeah, it just gets you jumping. And sometimes that's what you need. You just need something to get you moving. And then most of the time, you get moving and you're like, fuck this, I'm going to do what I love to do. And that's how it starts. And then you can just get on with your day.
It gets you that motive. Like your body starts, the blood starts pumping, and you're like, okay, now I feel ready to actually hit this.
Yeah.
And it's
Helps
usually
you
that.
mentally.
Yeah. How do you? I'm assuming. I mean, maybe you don't, but I'm assuming you have those days where you're like, I don't really feel like doing this. Do you have those days? And if you do, what's kind of your go-to method to get up and do it?
Like I tell everyone on Discord, I yell at myself. Like if I scream loud enough, I'll just do it. But I do have those days. I think everyone has those days. Like if you say you don't, you're full of shit. There's no way around it. Even if you absolutely love it, you're gonna have days where you're just like, oh, fuck this, I ain't doing it. But for me, I have a reason, like I want to go competitive. So I don't have that luxury of being like, well, I'm just gonna take this day off. Because if I want to even show up and do anything, I have to push myself harder than the next person does. So that's what motivates me is
Do you do like slower days when you feel like that, or do you just like ease into it but ultimately get the same work done? Like, do you ever cut it short a little bit, or do you really just kind of take your time?
on days like that, sometimes I just ease into it. I think that's the best way. Like I'll grab one of my beaded ropes and just do singles for 10 minutes. If my body doesn't feel it after 10 minutes, I'll do a really slow workout and then I'll cut it not really short, but I will cut it somewhat short just so I don't get frustrated. Because you have those workouts where you just keep going and you're having a bad day and it just fucks your whole week up. You hate it.
Yeah, that's something that I think you do extremely well, which is you tend to adjust your expectations to match the reality of what's going on that day. And I
Yeah.
think that's something I think that's a very, very difficult thing to do, especially for people who begin as competitors who then transition out of competition. When you're every single day you show up to a competitive practice, the expectation is to go harder, do better, go faster, all these different things. And when you
Yeah.
transition out of that, you can't you just can't do that every single practice. I think you did a good job of having your expectations be very accurate day to day.
Oh, yeah. And you have to have an understanding too. Like, not every day is going to be an amazing day. In fact, you're going to have 4 out of 5 days where it's a shit. And that's how it goes, especially with speed. Like,
Yeah. So
for me anyway.
speed can be several months of it not going well.
Yeah, exactly. Like you'll have one good day and you're like, oh, the stone's turning, I'm good.
I
And
want
then the
to
next day you're like, fuck this, I'm done.
I want to dive more into speed in a second, but first, you said you picked up jumping just to kind of get moving, get your heart rate going. At what point did it turn into a desire to do competition? Was it
The
when you?
first day. Oh, competition wise, six
Yeah.
months. I was like,
Oh,
jump rope
okay.
right away. Like the first day, I was like, man, I love this.
What was it the first day like? Because if you're I'm assuming you were only doing some singles and like some whatever basic
Yeah, for
freestyle, if
like
that.
10 seconds.
Yeah, yeah. So like, how did you know you liked it that quickly?
Like I said, I have an addictive personality.
Gotcha.
Like
Okay.
instantly I did it, fell in love, dude. I was like, first day, like it's not even bullshit. Like most people are like, oh, I'm in love and they're done in a week. No, I knew like I want to figure this out because it intrigued me. Like I messed up so much and I was watching people that I would consider average now and being like, okay, well, it can't be that fucking hard. And so I really went in and studied. And when something intrigues me like that, kind of like you, how you nerd out on numbers,
Yeah.
I do the same thing. Like you just nerd out on stuff that has no significant value.
Outside of the context of that thing, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then you like really get intrigued mentally and physically to figure it out. The same as diets.
What do you mean by that?
Like I learn about a diet, I want to know more about it. So I'm going to dive into it to see if it actually works. I'm going to research more about it. Like, people that do like the keto diets, I don't think keto diets are bad. I think they were made for a specific type of person to work. And then it turned into a trend.
I think originally for folks with epilepsy or
No, that's
legitimate
exactly it.
yeah, legitimate issues with the way their pathways create energy in their body. Um
Yeah, exactly. See, nerd.
Yeah, dude. Well, I mean, I mean, to go off for a second, keto specifically is very fascinating because of what it does inside of your body.
No, exactly.
it's not just consuming food. It's completely switching the pathway by which your body creates ATP or energy, which is
Yeah,
effectively the equivalent of taking your car to the mechanic and being like, "Hey, can you make this electric today?" Like that's basically what you're doing is going from gas to electric in your body,
yeah,
which is also why it helps epilepsies because, well, really out of the scope of this conversation, I'm not qualified to speak on that, but the basics are effectively that it's a different pathway. So, um, Yeah, you seem to
Well, I'm a
really.
doctor, so it's okay.
I mean, you read a couple articles online, so that qualifies you, right?
Yeah, I have a
you
PhD.
you skimmed you skimmed a textbook, and now you're set.
Yeah, men's health.
Oh man. So when you do your research, what are you looking for? Because I think a lot of times this idea of like, oh, well, I researched this thing and this is what I came up with is thrown around a lot, especially online. And that typically means I read about 5 of the articles on the first page of a Google search, which is sometimes
And
that
that's
can
where
be
things go
really,
wrong.
I mean, it can be very valuable to get a good initial sense of whatever that topic is, but there's a different level to fully researching. Can you describe how you research? You can take it anyway. I'm thinking jump rope
Like
and meal plans,
anything I
but
look
yeah.
into, yeah, like I research, I start with the basics and try to like deep dive because basics of anything is the most important. So I start researching the basics and then I try to go in and see where they like connect with the medium level. And then, I'm not like going in and just reading and be like, oh, that's true because he said it. Because even scientists have different opinions and theories about how something works. So my way of doing it is try to find the points where they do see eye to eye and try to bring those points together so I have a general idea of what I want to look into, not just pick a side and be like, well, this guy's right. Because he might be right in a point, but he could be wrong too.
You have a very systematic way of approaching the research, which I think is refreshing, and it's something that I definitely connect with myself because whenever like as you're describing that, I'm thinking of my own process, which is very much the same. Like, what are the key terms? What are the things that everyone knows about, or what's something that I don't get? Then each of those individual points, just like diving into that, and like you're saying, at some point you get to that medium level past the basics where things start to merge and connect. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we're kind of on the subject already. Let's just jump right into performance enhancement. We talked about this beforehand. I think this is a great topic. We were on a Discord session of Caffeinated a while ago, and we went we went super detailed on talking about this, and it was very fun. You recommended a great movie to me. Bigger, I think it's Bigger, Faster,
Bigger,
Stronger,
faster, stronger.
or
Yeah,
it might be Bigger,
really
Stronger,
good.
Faster. Either way, and I watched that, and everything with sports or performance enhancement. There's so many pieces to it. So I don't agree with 100% of things,
Yeah.
but I think that it was a very intriguing take on that. What
And he
let
stayed
Go for it.
unbiased for the most part.
He did.
And that's what I love about that movie is he didn't say, you're wrong, you're right. He did exactly what I like to do when I'm researching something. He looked at both sides and he weighed the cons and pros like you should do if you're looking into anything, especially performance enhancements, because everyone, their first take is they're deadly and they shouldn't be used. But there's that thin line of they can help athletes, like let's say football, they can help those athletes get hit by a 300-pound truck of a person and come back in the next couple days and play pretty well. I'm not saying enhance to the point where you're taking max dose. I'm saying like enhance to the point where your body is able to repair itself properly, but more efficiently and quickly so you can come back and not be knocked out for the rest of your career.
Yeah, and there's a lot of nuance to performance enhancement, like you're saying, is not just you become a freaking Hulk, right? Like that's not what this is
Yeah,
about.
no,
There's a lot of different uh
there's
con
doping. There's, I
yeah,
mean, there's so many different styles of enhancement, including eating properly. I
sleeping
mean,
properly.
people think, yeah, exactly. People think performance enhancing and they instantly go to steroids. But performance enhancing can be having a elevation chamber and sleeping in it at night, doping, which is pulling your own blood out and saving it for later so your heart doesn't have to pump as hard when you get into an extraneous activity, which is illegal too in some sports. So
It's very interesting all of the different ways the body as a machine can improve, but
yeah,
it's funny when you think about for everything except for the most elite level of athletics, like you said, the most impactful enhancements you can do to your body are sleeping, eating, and consistently training with the correct program.
yeah, no, exactly, exactly. And everyone instantly goes to elite and they think steroids, doping, and all the other dumb shit that however you got that idea because that's what people want you to think, so you think that. But if you actually research it, there's so much more to it.
And there's the flip side too, which is that there's plenty of people who don't do those main things and then they
Yeah.
get on a testosterone cycle without any supervision and can legitimately hurt themselves very
Yeah, I
terribly.
wonder why their heart starts exploding and because your body's outgrowing your heart and it can't pump enough blood and yeah, stupid shit like that. And that's the danger of steroid. There are dangers. And that's why I always say if someone is like, I do think steroids should be used, but they should be used medically and properly, like blood work and all of that, because it can actually hurt your liver and other parts, but it isn't as dangerous as they're made out.
Well, there was an interesting point in that movie, which was that the movie you recommended to me, which was that this is something that I wasn't fully aware of, but with certain compounds, because there's so many of them, you can't just bucket it
Yeah.
as like steroid. But like there are certain
Nah.
compounds that are designed, like you said, for recovery and for more energy production within intra workout. And what this allows the athlete to do is I'm sure there's muscle growth benefit, hypertrophy benefit, but more than that, it allows the athlete to stay consistent. It allows them to do more work within the given time that they're allotting to practice or to train. And it comes back to this idea of what's happening is that the enhancement is not necessarily it's not that it's growing their muscle while they sleep and don't do anything and sit around and
Mm-mm.
eat chips. It's that it's allowing them to go hit the gym harder and more consistently. And
Yeah.
I think it's probably the most common area that this is seen is bodybuilding, because that's
Oh,
what it's
yeah.
for. And it's interesting. I didn't realize, but it's interesting that bodybuilding has separate leagues, some dedicated to allowing performance enhancing
Natties.
compounds, yeah, and then some not allowing it, which is a very interesting concept
Oh, it
when you
is.
start to
And the
really
funny
dig
thing
into
is,
it.
most natties are using, they just know how to cut it in time
Yeah,
to dry
that I
out.
think sucks. That's annoying
It
to me.
does.
That's annoying to me.
It
Just
is.
like
It's wrong.
just yeah, like just do what you say you're gonna do, or go compete in the tournament that you know what I mean. Like that's lame. Um,
Yeah.
but I did want to touch on that because I think it's a very important concept that um, is very relevant as
Oh,
jump rope
yeah.
grows. Because as jump rope becomes to get larger and larger, and more importantly, as jump rope begins to gain notoriety and financial incentives for being successful at the sport, which we don't really have yet. It
No.
exists in little pockets here and there, but not at the scale of a typical sport. I think it's important to be aware of, and I think it's important to consider uh, the
Yeah.
ramifications. And like there's no answer, but I think when we were on that discord chat probably a month or so ago, and we're talking about what would that look like if there was a jump rope league that was would allow specific enhancement like
It'd be
compounds.
so amazing.
It's nuts. It's nuts because then because that begs the question. Like, not this isn't to say that this should or should not happen, but it's just
No, no, it's just a hypothetical,
it's a
but it's
hypothetical that
hilarious.
brings about the question of what's the actual limit with jump rope. And I think that really, I think in my view, from talking with you about this, from watching that movie and seeing some other things, reading some other things, and contemplating it, it's really what performance enhancement ultimately boils down to is what's the limit? What is the limit
Yeah.
for your body naturally? Which can be hard to define what constitutes natural when different compounds are being accepted or declined.
Yeah.
And what is truly, what are we capable of? And when you think about jump rope as a sport, when it comes to freestyle, but I mean, I think speed is a little bit more intense, but like all these different things that we see athletes do are pretty mind blowing, and you can't guarantee anything, but I would feel very comfortable wagering that 99.999% of jumpers have never even thought about or considered any compounds.
Yeah, because the first
If
compound that comes to their mind is testosterone.
right, right,
And
exactly.
but there's compounds out there, like, could you imagine there's a compound out there that actually helps the lungs expand better? A 3-minute jumper with no like lung fatigue, just going nonstop, that'd be ridiculous. We'd hit that 600 mark so quick.
Yeah. And because it's just crazy when you actually track the progressions of speed scores over time, over the years. It's kind of nuts the way they jumped, because it's like you look at the around 2000. I talked with Kelsey Mo Porter on a previous podcast, and she was saying, I forget what year it was. I think it was probably late 90s or early thousands. On her team, somebody would hit a 70 in 30 seconds, and everyone thought that was like, a god walking among them, like, whoa, like that's
Yeah,
insane. And that really was the limit. And when I was competing, like really competing, 130 seconds was like, that's like, it's nearly impossible to hit that. And now
like
people are,
Jake Eve hitting that 100 and everyone like shit their pants. And it
yeah,
is still amazing, but it's
it's
nothing
nuts.
compared now.
And it's, we can go down the rabbit hole of training now, because this
Mm,
this is now, now we've got these couple different variables of eating well, sleeping well, and that's obviously very important. But then
yeah.
there's training like an athlete,
Yeah. There's a
and
difference
it's
between
important.
training and training like an athlete.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on what should be done, how things are being done, just anything related to training?
I think you need to mentally prepare more than anything. Because if you're starting in and you're like, oh, I just want to jump into a competition, and you're not thinking about all the aspects of when you actually get to competition, you already failed. Like, say I'm training and I hit almost a 90, 86, 90 at home. I don't mean I'm going to hit 86, 90 in a competition.
That's
So
very
you got
true.
to mentally prepare, like, okay, I'm able to hit this. You got to focus on comfortable too. Like when I'm training, one of my big ones is like I talk about all the time is pacing and finding that comfortable pace. Like I want to be able to hold 75 comfortably and still be able to talk after I'm done completing it.
For a 30
Because
second run.
when I, yeah, like a 30-second run. And then that means like if I actually push myself, I can get those couple the few more points with very little stress. So I think you need to focus on not stressing your body too much. Well, you have to stress it, but I mean, not to the limit where you can't walk every day. And like you need to know your limits and know yourself. And then you go bedtime. Sleep is so important. And everyone neglects sleep. Like it's the last thing people care about.
Yeah,
But
and
I
it's
do think you don't have to get 8 hours. I don't believe you have to get 8 hours, but I think you have to schedule your sleep to where you're actually going to bed and waking up on a certain schedule. Because I only get like 6.5, 7, but I make sure that it's consistent.
and everyone has a different amount of sleep that's correct for their body too.
Yeah.
And that's,
And that goes back to knowing yourself.
yeah.
And then as diet goes, another neglected thing. Everyone wants to copy someone else's diet. And I've ran into you about this. numerous times, like water intake and all that. Like everyone drink a gallon of water, which makes no sense. Like, how do you put that as your base level, a gallon of water? Like, okay, I'm going to give my 60-pound daughter a gallon of water and a 6'2", 250-pound dude the same amount of water. Like, there's no
It's not calibrated.
rational, yeah, there's nothing. And it goes the same with food too, though, because people do the same thing. They're like, okay, this guy says he's putting 5,000 calories in a day. If I do that, I can look like him. Like, well, you dumbass, you're 3 feet shorter than him and about 100 pounds lighter than he is. So you're probably just gonna blow up like an Oompa Loompa and not be able to move.
This is one of the things that I do with my clients who are looking for weight loss specifically. As we discuss macros, but we go through a tracking process, because no matter what information I give to them, and there's a lot that is relevant and is important to know, but no matter what information I give to them, stats, numbers, whatever, none of it is going to be more important than actually looking at what you're doing, what your actions are, and what works for you. It's a lot more messy. It's a lot less satisfying in terms of what's the quick answer. There isn't one besides,
Hmm.
actually tracking
There
what you
is no
do.
quick answer.
But once, like you're saying, once you do pay attention to yourself, once you do see those numbers, it's pretty amazing going through like, I really enjoy going through this process with people, because they look back at their data and they're like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, if you look at this and this, and like, oh, okay. And I'm like, how'd you feel at these amount of calories versus these, and you start to just pay attention and you build up a very intuitive sense of what works for you in terms of meal plan. And that's more of the case of like weight loss, but the same thing applies to weight maintenance as well.
Yeah,
It gets a little bit
exactly.
more specific when you start talking about hypertrophy and muscle building, because there's a couple other important pieces of that. But um, it's everything you're saying is so true and important. I think one of the pieces of training, I think we've talked about this. I don't know how much you've looked into it. I would imagine a good amount. One of the pieces of training that has been most useful for me in the past year, something that's been very interesting for me to learn about, is the training of professional cyclists. And
Oh
the
yeah, I've
you know,
really gotten into that.
it's crazy that they spend so much time. It's almost that they're spending the majority of their time in a zone 2 and a zone 5. And for those who are not familiar, zone 2 is relatively low effort. You could still talk if you wanted to. It is likely not going to feel challenging, but what it does inside of your body is amazing. It taxes your mitochondria, which is effectively in the peak zone 2. You're at your highest level of creating energy in uh, an aerobic state. And then zone 5 is literally the opposite, which is pushing as hard as you
You're
possibly can
dying.
go. Yeah. 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 Exactly. And it's been very interesting to hear how professional cyclists train. But then
It's insane.
it's wild. But then it's also interesting to hear about a lot of the anatomical adaptations that they have, or their transitions out of the sport that are sometimes not successful. The specifics being that a lot of one of the doctors, Dr. Peter Attia, that I listen to a lot, was discussing this topic with Dr. San Inigo Milan. I'll link that in the show notes. But the conversation was very detailed and very interesting to hear that in somebody who they compared average human, they compared elite cyclist, and they compared somebody who's diabetic, because that is diabetic research
Oh
is,
yeah, you talked about this. That is
yeah,
really interesting.
yeah. Dr. Peter Attia focuses on diabetic research, and there was when you look at the muscle fiber level, there was in the diabetic person, there was a fat deposit that was near the actual muscle cell. In a standard person who is just, there's nothing crazy going on, whether crazy elite athlete or being diabetic, the fat deposit was located much, much farther away, and it was not near the
Yeah.
muscle cell. But in the elite cyclist, it was also near the muscle cell, which was very interesting in terms of what are the mechanisms of the body that are happening here. And
It's like
yeah,
they change their whole anatomy to be
yeah.
a healthy diabetic.
Well, and healthy is even questionable because a lot of the elite cyclists, when they leave the sport, end up having very intense health problems because
Yeah.
they are used to being able to eat anything, do whatever they want, and they have a very hard time apparently transitioning out of that into, I guess, being average, if you want to give it that label. And I think it's interesting related to jump rope because we haven't really seen that yet. We
We
haven't
haven't
really,
hit that
you
because if you
know,
look at like physical form of every speed jumper, doesn't matter 30-second, 1 minute, 3 minute, they're all the same size, it seems like.
mm-hmm. Because of
In other
youth,
sports,
you know,
yeah.
yeah,
But in like the bigger sports that have like really dug in scientifically because there's money actually being poured into it, you look at like certain cyclists and their legs are like tree trunks. But then you see the long distance ones, same as runners. Long distance runners are usually really small frame. And then you have the shorter distance that look like tanks. And that's where I think like jump rope could really benefit from some kind of money being brought in. Because if we could put some scientific funding behind it, I think speed could really turn into something else. I think the Koreans are doing a really good idea.
they seem to be making a lot of insane progress. And this idea of
Yeah.
specialization, I just spoke with Carly Simpson and Chris Brown about this. The episode is not published as of right now when we're talking, but we did discuss
Mhm.
this idea of back in the day, FISAC, one of the jump rope organizations, basically architected their rules so that you had to do every event, and there it's very difficult. Like you couldn't just show up and do one event, so you couldn't specialize. And
Yeah, and that's where a problem is too. If you can't specialize in something, how do we expect the sport to actually grow to where it needs to be?
yeah, yeah, and I think that it'll be interesting to see how things develop with that in the future because a 30-second speed jumper or a 10-second or a 15-second, if that becomes an event, which it probably should, um,
Hmm.
that type of jumper who specializes in that is going to look so different than a 3 or 4 or 10 minute speed jumper, which
Exactly.
I
They're going to
think,
have probably wider hips and bigger legs, and
yeah,
the long distance guy is probably going to look a little guy or girl. It's going to look thinner.
yeah. And for good reason because it's going to matter
Yeah.
so much more that you shave off every, centimeter of your rope, that you have as tight as possible form,
Yeah.
because in that 5 or 10 minutes, which would be a very interesting event, um, you if you save, percentage of a second every time you jump, that's going to add up over 5 to 10
Hmm.
minutes. In 10, 15, 30 seconds it might not. It's
Yeah.
probably less important. You mentioned research. What, I mean, maybe nothing will come to mind, but if anything does come to mind, what is some type of research that you think would be very interesting to have in the sport?
Well, just like on the subject we're having right now, like we're talking about long distance runners being thinner, and that's because the heart doesn't have to pump as much at a slower pace. And plus, the muscles aren't asking for more glycogen and everything else. But a power jumper that's doing 10 to 15 seconds, they're going to need all that glycogen to actually push harder than the long distance runner. And that would be awesome research. And then also research into proper diets for a specific group of jumpers. Like, I
That's
think
interesting.
there's not really any information on, because there isn't any, about dieting and jumping. There's one universal diet, and that needs to change.
What is that universal diet?
Well, eat your greens, eat your
Oh,
proteins,
gotcha,
blah, blah,
gotcha. Yeah,
blah.
like
Like
the
there's
food plate.
no,
Yep.
yeah, your average triangle, but it's so much more complex than that. And with jump rope not being as known, we're basically going off diets that other sports are saying to do, but the body's not doing the same mechanics as those sports are doing. And that's something that should be researched is how the mechanics of like a speed jumper, depending on what time limit he's doing and what kind of nutrition is going to benefit him the most or her.
I I spoke with this about Dylan Plummer on a previous podcast. Do you think that the peak level of potential performance in jump rope is reserved to the under 18 jumpers, or do you think that we just haven't yet
No,
seen? Okay. I had a feeling that that would be
we
your
just
answer,
haven't
but
seen it yet.
yeah.
We haven't seen nothing yet. If you look at like Tori Boggs, like I've gone back and looked in the past, and Adriana Benegi used to stomp her out under 18. Look at her now. Now she's a monster. Like she's killing it. And I think she's like late 20s. And that's where that comes into athletes actually getting paid. Like we've talked about this so much. If we had athletes actually paid to professionally jump, I think we could see mid 20s as dominating.
I think in my mind, the financial incentive um, at this point, and this could change in the future, but at this point, my thought about this is that the financial incentive is less so about the structure of the organizations. It's still relevant, of course, but it's less about the actual organizations, and it's more about um, events that garner attention for sponsors to get in front of those eyeballs. It seems to me
Mm-hmm.
that that's likely going to be the primary driver of professional athletes, right? Because we have professional
Yeah.
jumpers who do jump rope for a professional reason or for a career. Lee Reisig does performance. Tori does a variety of things, including performance, and I'm sure the influencer work that she does. And there are many.
Yeah.
Adrian Beneji has a legitimate company that goes out and a group of jumpers that she teaches to go teach. Nick Woodard is another person who does a tremendous amount with learning the ropes. That exists, but I think the
They're all
professional
amazing too.
they are, and I think the
But
profession, yeah,
you said the key word performer.
right.
Like, I'm not saying anything bad about being a performer. Like, they're amazing. But performance is taken away from the competition edge of it to a certain extent, I think, too, because people see what they're doing. They're not seeing like full competition speed, freestyle. Like, it's completely different. In my opinion, from what I've watched, it's completely different.
It's not even the same. There's a lot
Yeah.
of the same types of skills, but the thought process behind how you design routines for freestyle,
Yeah.
speed's not really a factor in performance, other than like an opener or a closer, or like
Yeah.
to match the beat of the song. It can be very useful, but the entire intention around performance is to excite a crowd, and what excites
It's
a
the show.
crowd, right, and what excites the crowd is entirely different than what is technically difficult. And this is this is a I know you share the sentiment. This is a thing that competitive jump ropers and those who know the sport well tend to bang their head against the wall about, is that you'll see someone do an extremely clean, like if you see someone like Luke Boom pull off an extremely clean triple or quadruple under combination, he'll get less reaction than somebody who does a
A
TJ
TJ.
with not as good form. And the reason is
Yeah.
that when it looks more effortful, then it
Yeah.
seems to be more difficult. And that's a um, it's
Yeah.
definitely
And that's
frustrating, but
frustrating.
yeah, it's frustrating, but at this point, I think that it just comes back to that, like bridging that gap, right? Like when people start
Yeah.
to, not everyone needs to learn about the sport of jump rope because it's just not relevant to them, you
Yeah.
know?
It's not going to be for everyone. I don't believe that at all. But I do believe that for people that are watching all this performance and they believe that's what jump rope is, in my opinion, it's not. To me, jump rope is all different forms, but performance and freestyle are two different things. Like you're not going to see a teeterboard in a fucking competition with freestyle. And I'm not saying that's not badass. It's awesome that they do that. They're, but it's just not the case.
It's a completely different purpose. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. It's just, you have a way with words discussing this. I love it. But no, the teeter board specifically is such a great example because, as someone who's jumped on I haven't done a teeter board, but I have done a trampoline. And even a
Oh yeah.
trampoline, it feels so different. Like you have to engage your
Oh
core
yeah.
a lot more, and it's scary.
Burns you out quicker too.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of what we're discussing about these different types makes me really like genuinely excited for the future of what it could become, because it means that we have all these different participants who find their own part of jump rope and then get to enjoy it. But we all can still come together and hang with each other because it's jump rope. Like you can see, like I've been in positions where like you'll have someone who's a boxer, primarily boxer style of jumping, meet someone who is into like rope flow, which is very different, meet someone who is competitive focused, and they can all get along and hang out and exchange ideas.
Yeah, because they're generally the same thing, but they're not.
Right. Well, a lot of it's actually the exact same mechanics, but it's stylized differently too.
Exactly. Yeah. Mentally, it's different. But that's the good thing about jump rope is it's a raw sport. Like there's no singling out, this is what you do. It's you have your way of putting in your own style into whatever you're interested in doing.
How long did it take you to get to that point? Because I would imagine, I know we talked a lot in the past, and we've talked about a lot of different subjects, but I know that it's very easy, especially for someone like yourself who does the research and really gets into competitive jump rope. It's very easy to see that as the only way of doing things. I know for myself, growing up in competition for a very long time, I was like, if it's competitive jump rope, it's real. If it's not, then it's not really jump rope. How long did it take you to come around to the idea that you just articulated, which is it's for everybody? Was that immediate, or was that something that took time? Or
it wasn't immediate. It definitely wasn't immediate. Like I was learning speed, and I think I got bitter because people that were doing not even average, below average things were on social media, and it gets this big following for nothing, in my opinion. And so it's this kind of like this bitter feeling like, okay, why is that? And then I see Akatoshi doing 7 unders and barely getting anything, but eventually it's just like, I don't know, I got this idea of like, as long as you're enjoying yourself, because I started out not wanting to do competition. I started out just wanting to get in shape. And that idea turned into, well, what if that's what everyone else is trying to do? They're just trying to put their foot in the door, figure things out. And that's the best way for me to go about it, because there shouldn't be any real bitterness. Like, as far as I'm concerned, I'll just ignore the people that annoy me and watch the stuff that I want to watch. And if no one wants to watch that, they're missing out.
That is honestly exactly what I was hoping you would articulate, because I know we've chatted about this before, but it's such an important. I've tried to discuss this publicly on like YouTube videos or on stories or whatever, just on different platforms. And this idea that you can architect what you're exposed to and find the type of jumping that you want to do, and just always explore and keep looking. It's very easy to create the experience that you want with jumping.
Yeah.
And I like what you articulated, which is you came around to this point of, well, what if everyone else is doing the same thing that I did and they're also working through their journey, I think we tend to see things as very fixed in time right now, when in reality, it's all just a process, and it's moving and evolving always. Do you feel like jump rope has helped your self-esteem at all?
Not really. I don't really care what anyone thinks. I think it made it worse at first, to be honest.
In what way? You're like, my
'Cause-
skills are not good.
no, I felt like I was pretty decent, you know. That I get on social media and I start seeing competitive jumpers, and I'm like, okay. And it didn't hurt me. It was just like, well, I'm gonna avoid that. Let's go look what these losers are doing. And they're just doing basic shit, and everyone's like fucking landing on their face with excitement. I'm like, that's pretty easy. I can do that. But and then you post your first video and nothing. Even if you did it better than someone else, nothing. And I remember my first year, it was just like, fuck this. I hate this. Then I started getting followers, and it's like, well, now I have to improve.
You have to show the
So I
progress.
can, I got to show my progress. And I don't know. I just, eventually I was like, I'm not even being myself. Like, I'm being friendly to people that I don't care about. And that's just not me. Like, I need to be me. So I started my other channel, or the Grim channel.
Yeah, and now everyone knows you as Grim
So,
Leaper.
yeah,
Or
no one here remembers rope.
yeah, or if you're on Discord, you know you as Dr. Grim Leaper PhD.
Yeah, PhD.
It took a couple months of being on Discord to earn that, but you got it.
Oh yeah.
So much of the way you approach jumping is very authentic and thoughtful, and that's why I've always enjoyed chatting with you, because you you think about the things you're doing with jump rope, and how you're approaching it. Let's get into speed step. What's
Yes.
let's just do all things speed. I kind of want to go with how did you originally start training speed? Things that you've learned about speed, how you're training speed now. And feel free to just go down whatever avenue that pops in your mind.
When I started speed, I hated it. Like I told you before, I couldn't stand it. I thought it was the dumbest shit ever. Had a speed cable, and I was like, man, fuck this. I'm never touching a speed rope again. Because you should not have a bare cable when you start. No information out there. So I just figured I sucked. And then I tried it again, but I used like PVC, and I did beaded, you know. And I was like, okay, this ain't so bad. And then I went down to the 3/32 cable, and
Was that a coated?
yeah, the coated 3/32. And they're a little stiffer, but it feels like a bare cable, but it's a little bit slower. Like, it doesn't cut as nice as a bare cable, which really helped get that pacing thing. And then I saw like Mike and you do a little bit of speed on your channels, and I was like, oh, okay, I talked to these guys, maybe they'll help me out.
Then I blocked you. Just kidding.
Yeah. But yeah, the 3/32 cable, like, it made a big difference, but my form was still really, it was basic. It was the beginning form of almost every speed jumper.
Yep.
Standing straight up, because that's all you hear when you go watch YouTube tutorials. Stand straight up. Don't bend your chest. It's completely different.
Well, I mean, it's
no
tutorials. Yeah, it's tutorials for running in place, not speed step. And even though the movement looks the same, the way it's applied, the style that is layered on top of the mechanics is entirely different. And you could and would argue that the mechanics of speed step are entirely different than even running in place, like you're saying.
Oh, it is. Yeah. Because running in place, as you can see, a lot of people have been jumping for like 10 years and they still have shit form, but it works. But with speed, you start fixing your form. Like, I started watching the competitions. Let's start there. I really wanted to watch like these competitions, I started watching them, and you see these Koreans bent over in like a 90-degree angle, and you're like, what the hell is going on?
That must have been
And
so shocking for you to like go from jumping primarily for like, I'm going to enjoy this fitness reasons. And then you get into speed step and you're like, I don't understand why their posture is like this. Like that must have been so shocking.
it is different because you see a completely different style on Instagram, like the majority of the bigger names. It's completely different. And then you watch competition. Like I said, I'm like seeing freestyle now, it just doesn't impress me because I watched the competition, like big name championship. And so now I see freestyle and I'm like, oh, that was cute.
Well, I mean, I genuinely am impressed that you can see the differences of freestyle because being able to see what's happening is honestly some of the hardest part of watching freestyle. It's really challenging to see what the athlete is actually doing unless you're slowing
Mhm.
it down frame by frame. Even then, if you don't already have an understanding of skills, it can be so hard to unpack what's really going on, which is impressive that you figured that out.
But I learned visually too, like with speed. I focus on everything from how much their knees bent to the wrist rotations, like where their shoulders, if they're pulled back or if they're forward. Because the speed jumpers, like let's say Isaac, he doesn't have the 90, or Stewart, he doesn't have the 90. He's bent over quite a bit, but he's not Korean bent over.
Well,
And
he
he's
still has a
still
relatively open
fast.
chest. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Like there's that same thing going on. Like the Koreans, like you said, the open chest, it's the same thing. Only difference is it's the size of the rope and the how forward they're bent over. But more standing up straight, there's more elbow bending, it seems like. With the Koreans, their arms are straight down.
Yeah. They are. Do you how did you practice this? Like you started seeing these different elements of the mechanics of speed step. What was your process? Just like go do it? Were you systematic? How did you approach that?
Very slowly.
Yep. Yep.
Very slowly. You don't just
Man,
bend
he
over and
very
cut your rope
slowly.
three
The other
feet.
the other day we were talking about programming, and I was jump rope programming, and I was like, yeah, I think it makes sense to take like 6 to 8 months to get someone up to the point where they're doing a 3 minute speed, and you're like, that's slow. How did you learn speed step? I
But
went
it really
slowly.
isn't. It really isn't
No,
though.
it's not. I know.
Three
I know
minutes and
you were messing with
yeah.
me, but it was still pretty funny.
Yeah, it's you have to start slower. It's just frustrating.
What was that? What did that look like for you as you were training? You said you were going slowly. What did those sessions look like?
First, it was like my first speed was the like I started 30 seconds. Those were awful. And I was just like, I have no idea what I'm doing. So all I'm doing is 30 seconds with 15 to 30-second breaks,
Oh my
like
god,
running it like I would a program, but I didn't have
dude!
any idea about
You
speed. So,
you were doing half of the active period as your rest period. You're doing 15 seconds
oh,
rest.
yeah, because I was doing Tabatas like nothing, but
That
speed
is like
is
murder.
not a worker. Yeah. And so, like, I think I started talking to you, and you were like, kind of told me some things I could try out. And started going down to the like 10 to 15 seconds. And I even like upped the rest time to like 30 seconds because even that's intense. If you do 15 seconds with a 15-second break, you're going to die if you've never done speed before. So I jumped mine up to 30 seconds just to focus on my breathing and then get right back into it. And then eventually, I didn't jump into 3 minute for like 2 months. Like I think I tried a slow 3 minute and I didn't think I was gonna make it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It is not. Uh, for the light at heart. It is a very
No.
intense endeavor.
Yeah, 3 minutes are insane. Like even when you're used to them, it doesn't matter. They're still torture.
Well, I mean, even last, I think, yeah, it was last week. Well, the last couple weeks I've been training very long endurance sets of speed. So 5 minutes. I did a 10-minute speed as well, and I did a 3 minute within 7 days of the 10 minute. And like
Mhm.
you go into it thinking like, well, if I did 10, 3 is gonna be easy, right? And
Yeah.
the second you decide you want to get at least a halfway decent score for you, it's over.
Yeah.
Like your heart rate, at least mine, was,
Spikes.
yeah, I mean it. I mean, this is something that we could potentially get into, but I was maintaining I think a 96 to 98% of max heart rate throughout the
Oh my
duration of
God.
that, which is when you back that up to this is like this is a point that I'm currently not super solid on. I'm looking at trying to find research about, but theoretically that shouldn't really be possible. Like sustaining a heart rate above 90% for a duration longer than a minute to a minute and a half is
Yeah.
theoretically not supposed to happen, you know? So I don't have an answer on that yet, but it's brutal. Like
Yeah.
it's oof. Holding that is like, I
Not
don't know.
only does your heart feel like it's going to explode, but your whole body starts doing whatever it wants.
It gets crazy, especially if you decide
Yeah.
that day I didn't, I did it fresh, but especially if you decide to do a 5 or 10 minute or whatever long distance set, if you do that
Mm.
after like deadlifts or squats or like some kind of a leg workout, you're just jello. You're just jello by the end of it.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. And the long distance, I love long distance because you go into it mentally prepared for a slow pace. Like if you're one of those assholes that go in like, okay, I'm gonna do 10 minute and I'm gonna hit 100 every minute. Well, good luck.
Yeah.
But me personally, I go in there and I'm like, I'm gonna survive this
I'm gonna survive. What
so I can still move.
how important, we've touched on this a little bit, how important do you think mental framing is when you do speed step, and how do you approach the way you mentally frame your speed training?
It's everything.
Yeah, I had a feeling you would say
Because
that.
like it, well, like framing like every day of the week, like if you have your workout set to a certain way, like say me right now, I'm doing 3 weeks body weight and every day is speed. But I'm not doing full blast speed on my workout days. I'm doing slow, collected speed runs for 5 to 10 minutes after my workout. Because if I went full blast, then the whole week's going to be ruined.
Right.
And
Right.
then on the days where there's no, I do 1 day a week, 1 day where I go full blast. I'm putting everything I can into it 1 day a week because the rest of the week, if you're running a workout and I have, let's say, our 30 seconds by eight sets type thing. If I went full blast on 2 days a week, I'm probably not going to make it to the third day. So mentally framing it, like you have to understand your own like weaknesses and can't just jump in and be like, I'm doing it every day this week as full as I can. Because I did that when I first started and ended up like messing my ankle up and because your body's just not meant to push that hard.
It's a recipe for burnout.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
feel like this is one of the main reasons why a lot of competitive jumpers don't train speed or don't enjoy training speed. There are many teams that do and they do it well, but I think there's a lot that don't. At least in my experience, the teams that I was on, it was never like let's train speed. It was pretty much forgotten until about 6 weeks before competition, and so or like the cherry picked day where you would do speed. But I think a lot of that is because exactly what you articulated, structuring it and the way you sequence it in terms of the week, the month, the year is so important to not burn out
Mhm.
the athletes. And if you don't do it correctly, you have zero shot of not only making progress, but of even getting through the program in the first place.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
I
And you have
think,
to learn that the hard way, I think. But
yeah, I think this is even, I mean, that's for the competitive context. For because we have had a lot of good discussions in the Discord server about this topic. For somebody who's new to jumping or new to speed, either way, relatively similar, um, what pieces of advice would you offer them about getting into training speed for the first time?
don't use a bare cable. Don't use fixed cables because you're going to be shortening your rope a lot if you're taking speed serious. Um, don't go all in. Find a pace that works for you. Pacing, oh my God. That's why I tell everyone learn your pacing. No one wants to learn pacing. They go in and they want to go as fast as they can. They mess up after 2 rotations and they wonder what's going on because you got to figure out your rotation and calculate it. When you're shortening your ropes, you need to learn like where your hands are. You need to have that focus on your hands big, or else you're just going to smack yourself in the back of the head. And like when you start doing the bent over movements, you need to learn where your hands need to be and focus on your knees coming forward. That's what you taught me. I remember that because I used to have a kickback and that screws you up so bad. But once you start driving your knees forward, that makes a big difference too.
And that driving the knees forward ultimately allows your foot to travel directly up and down vertical, which means you're not wasting energy by going into a full high knee, and you're not wasting energy or introducing a potential catch point by kicking your leg or kicking your foot back as well.
The pacing thing, like one way that really helped me is no rope.
That is such a game changer, dude. Yeah, that, oh man, please keep going because that is such a good piece of advice.
And I tell people all the time they don't do it, but they need to understand that if you can get your feet to pace on a metronome without your hands, mechanically your feet are already going to understand what to do when you do bring your hands in.
Yep.
And it makes all the difference.
There's three, well, in at RX Smart Gear, they have a double under clinic, and it's effectively broken up in terms of how to bound correctly, how to rotate the rope, and then the timing, which is bringing them both together. And speed is very much the same, where all three pieces of that are entirely distinct. And
Yeah.
to always train all of those three pieces together all the time is just not a good decision,
No.
because you, like you're saying, you need to understand each individual piece, and then when you bring them together, that's its own that's its own animal to work with.
Yeah. And I used trainers too when I was starting out, like a lot to, and I'd video, not to put on Instagram, but to watch and see like, because even like when you start getting faster, even like the eighth of an inch of your wrist being out of place throws the rope off. And so I was training my wrist and watching the video and like trying to figure out, okay, like say 15 seconds, I'm feeling kind of tired. My arm starts to drift. So I need to counteract that before I bring the real rope in, or else I'm going to miss. And it's just little thing like the basics of speed are so much more complicated than they sound. But if you pull in these basics, I feel like everyone can do speed. I don't care if you're going slow or if you're only doing one a second, or doesn't matter, but everyone can get decent at speed if they focus on the basics and fundamentals.
And stay patient with themselves, because
Yeah, stay very patient.
yeah, it's not like, in freestyle you can unlock a skill, and then maybe you still have a couple more weeks to get it consistently, to get it most of the time. But then once you've hit that threshold, like, you've pretty much got it. In speed, it's not it's not like that. And in speed, you can make improvements on a lot of things, but you don't typically fix something permanently. So for example, like
No.
with my own arms tend to be in different positions. It's a very common thing in speed step, is that the arms are
Yeah.
not at an equal level. And there's a lot of biomechanical and muscular reasons for that. But it's not something that gets like fixed with a couple weeks of practice. It's something that always has to be monitored. At least that's been my experience with it. And every time I find myself missing aggressively, it's because my arms are drifting into the wrong position. And
it's such minuscule differences too. That's
yeah,
what's funny. Like when you miss and you watch the video, if you're not looking for where it went wrong, you're just like, the hell happened? Was my pacing off? And it's usually not your pacing. It's just a little movement that you can barely catch unless you know what you're watching for, that causes the rope to do that.
and it's extremely frustrating.
Oh yeah.
There are so many days where you just want to rage quit and
Yeah.
just walk away.
And sometimes you should.
And sometimes you should. Yeah, exactly. I think one of the on the tangent of patience, I think in addition to patience with um just the process of mistakes and stuff, there's also patience with putting in the time and trusting the programming, or trusting the process that you're going down in terms of working out, because you might have months of it not feeling that great, but if you have a good or decent program to follow, assuming that you got it from, I mean, if you're just beginning it, it's not super important. It's just being consistent. But then later on, as you
Yeah.
get faster and faster, it gets a little bit more important. But it's like sticking with that and being patient, and knowing that even if you have several weeks of bad training in a row, you can still come out ahead in a few months. And I think that with speed, like with all jump rope, you really should take a wider view of how you're progressing your skills,
Yeah.
because it takes time. But with speed specifically, I think you mentioned to me that you do it yearly, like you review it yearly instead of month to month, or did you say
Oh
that?
yeah, we were talking about that because everyone looks day to day on their speed. And that's a joke. Like you ain't gonna learn shit day to day watching your speed. But I try to look like long distance. Like I don't count on getting very much accomplished in a month. It's unrealistic. Like I hope I can get a half a second faster. Once you start hitting that level, like you just hope for that half second faster. You start reviewing like, okay, what can I change to add a point to my run?
And I think it's important to also put the context into of where you're at with your speed training, because when you first start, it's very likely that you could see tremendous progress in 3
Oh
months,
yeah.
6 months, because that's kind of how any skill is, right? That first learning curve tends to be, not every skill, but it tends to be relatively rapid in compared to the full scope of your training. And you're at a point now where I think everyone kind of has a natural, like their natural top pace that they can reach pretty
Hmm.
easily, and then pushing beyond that is where things get very challenging. Um, and you're at that point now where you're trying to break through the threshold, and breaking through that next threshold with speed is, uh, it's very very hard.
And that threshold is a big metal wall that, and all you have is a hammer to hit it with,
Yeah.
because it ain't gonna happen fast. And if you think it is, then you're gonna be very sorely mistaken when your score starts to go down because you're frustrated. And that's another thing, part of training people need to realize, like for me, like one of my big focuses, besides like we talked about breathing, is mistakes, recovering from your mistakes.
Yep.
And that's one of my big focuses too. Like 2 days a week, I pretend like I'm in competition. And if I make a mistake, my goal is to shorten it, even if it's by milliseconds, for a faster ending time. And most people, they just stop.
How do you simulate competition? Is that just a mental thing? Like you just have like some music playing or what is that? How do you do that?
I don't play any music because
Oh,
I'm
okay.
assuming there wouldn't be any music when I'm doing a speed run. So on those days, there's no music and it's just me against myself. So that's basically all I do. I
That's
just
such a
go in and
mentally it's such a mentally challenging position to be in. Like
it
it's
is
so
like,
and it's funny because I think if, for for those who are really hearing what we're saying and listening to this talk about speed, it's probably gotten to the point where it's like, guys, this just sounds hard and terrible. Like why would anyone do this? And I think that the one of the I mean, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, but one of the main benefits in my mind is it's so numbers focused. There's not thinking, it's not creative, and you just get in there, you grab your rope, and
just drive.
while you can spend time getting more efficient, you also can just hit it and just go. And
Yep.
I think it's a very good complement to freestyle.
And it's raw. And when you pick up a freestyle rope, it feels slow. So your
Yeah.
movements feel easier when you start doing freestyle. Like I noticed after I started doing speed and I was in it for like 2 or 3 months, I played around with freestyle and I like unlocked so much.
Yep.
And I think it was the speed. I tell people that like if you can get your speed up decent, just like even regular speed run, your doubles are going to become much easier because your wrist has already got the mechanics to spin faster. You just have to switch that pacing in your wrists up just a little bit to a 1-2 instead of a 1-1.
This is like my whole philosophy around efficiency is that efficiency is not discipline for discipline's sake for making your life worse. It's that when you actually train to be efficient, it unlocks everything else by default. And this is exactly what you just articulated. If you can turn a rope at the fastest pace possible for you, there's not going to be very many other skills that are going to require that. But because you can do it at that level, you can then relax during all of the lower levels, which is most of the skills like you talked about in freestyle, because it's very few that require that amount of effort, unless it's like quads or quints or sixes or whatever. But that's a different that's a different discussion that most people
Yeah.
are not going to get to, because they don't need to. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um,
There's no reason to.
but like you're saying, at that point, when you get that level of speed, it just makes so many other things a lot more manageable and more enjoyable.
I think you're able to focus on them a lot easier too. Because if
Yeah.
you're able to focus on your body doing multiple different things for speed, being able to lift your leg up for a TJ just seems mentally easy because your brain's not running at 100 miles per hour like it is with speed. You can actually slow your brain down.
One of the biggest things that I see speed correcting, granted, it requires coaching, it's not a natural correction, but like with a lot of the clients that I've coached doing speed, a lot of them, especially those who began jump rope only using heavy ropes, have a what I call a rowing form where the hands just move
Oh,
forwards.
yeah.
Yep. And they pull.
Yep. I know what you're talking about.
Yep. They pull towards the body. And this is very common, but it is a very, very challenging form for people to break. It's up there, I think, as one of the most challenging uh, styles of jumping to break and to change. And speed, you have to there's like you cannot you can basically you can't have the axis of your revolution constantly be shifting forward and backwards during speed. It
Oh,
won't
no.
work. It won't work.
Yeah.
Even
At
at
all.
yeah, even at lower paces. And this is something that people will feel like because you're trying to get the rope to accelerate, it immediately pulls out and brings front of mind that form. It makes it very, very, very clear, which makes it a very awesome opportunity to fix that. And it's not easy. It still does take some time.
Oh yeah, it's kind of like the double bounce. I mean,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
not necessarily easy to fix, but with time and proper like coaching or whatever, it is actually really easy to break.
Well, and the double bounce too, I think is really important for people to learn to do that and a single bounce. But it's the people that
Yeah,
are doing the double bounce on accident. But
consistently.
that tends to be. I found that to be pretty simple to fix that, because it really is just speeding up the rope, basically, is what's going on. But again, you see that mostly with folks who are using a heavy rope. So as soon as you
Yeah,
make the rope a little bit like, and I'm 3 ounces is a good weight for a beginner, because you can actually still feel it, right? We're not saying grab a wire rope, or even a PVC can sometimes be a
no, no,
little bit
no.
light.
I
But
think
like
like the 5 mils is like perfect to start out with.
5 mil or 3 ounce like coated cable or
Yeah.
a beaded rope. Those are all pretty much in the same
Oh yeah,
ballpark.
beaded ropes. How'd I forget about that?
Yeah.
I always
Yeah.
recommend beaded ropes.
Yeah. Beaded ropes are the jam. But the rowing, what I was going to say is that as soon as that person improves it on speed step, you immediately see that translation in their freestyle skills as well, for everything that you just said. And it's a great, one of the things that I love so much about speed is it shows you all of your deficiencies immediately, and it just puts it right out there on a poster in front of your face.
Yeah, man, bitch slaps you so hard, really quick too.
And
Like,
then it
this is
makes
why you're screwing up.
and then it makes it so I mean, if you're into improving and being more efficient, which not everyone is and not everyone needs to be, depending on what your goals are, but if you
Yeah,
are, it makes it's a really great way to make those improvements, which makes you an overall, I always wonder, I think that speed plus mental expectation is why competitive jump ropers learn so quickly. I mean, I don't really
I
know the
agree.
exact reasons, but you see kids that are 5 to 10 years old who are
Yeah,
doing very, very good speed scores, who learn a lot of great freestyle skills, and they also
decent at freestyle. Like they jump into
yeah.
freestyle and it's just like, wait, what?
And you don't need to explain things to them either. Like
Yeah,
literally you just have to show them a skill and be like, "Oh, move your hand like this." And like that's the extent of
and
the coaching that you need a lot of the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time.
yeah, they
It's interesting.
understand the mechanics after doing speed. It's crazy to see that. Like
Yeah.
even on Instagram, I remember a little kid and all he did was speed for the first couple months, and then all of a sudden he's doing crazy freestyle things. They're making the adults look bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like, what's going on here? Like I quit.
I quit.
And he wasn't even doing fast speed. Like this is what people need to understand. You don't have to be ridiculous fast. The mechanics alone are gonna help you like with everything jump rope.
With everything. Yeah. That literally has been an hour and a half, and that flew by so fast. I thought that it had been like
Yeah.
maybe 45 minutes, and it's been an hour and a half. Dude, there are still so many things that we could get into. I think I'm gonna wrap it up, unless is there anything that you specifically would like to cover? Anything that kind of pops into your mind?
Not that I can think of. We can do a round two later.
Oh, we're going to. We're absolutely going to. I think this is going to be a really good intro for people who want to know more about speed, want to get into speed, and just to overall just expose people to speed. Because most people
Yeah.
don't even know that speed training exists, just like, you didn't until you went digging and digging.
Yeah.
Let's move into this last question of the podcast, which is, what is jump rope to you?
It's a freedom of expression. I don't know. It's raw. It's everything. Like you can put your full character into what you're doing with jump rope, and you can tell like a lot about how a person is by how they jump. I've noticed. Not with really necessarily speed. Like when I see someone do really good with speed, all I think is calculation. Like they're a very calculated person. And freestyle, like the Devin Meeks out there, like the way he jumps, it's very fun. You know,
Yeah.
like you can see the personality come through in someone's jumping style. And I love that about jump rope. Like it can show you who you are if you don't allow it to take over you. There's a difference.
Yeah, and I think that double dutch does the same thing too. We didn't really get into much
Oh,
double dutch
how
this
did we
time, but
forget about that?
we just
Double
got
Dutch is
so focused
amazing.
on the single rope speed. Yeah, double dutch is, but double dutch also really does pull out. Like I've always noticed, like when you watch a team, or if you this, let me back up. When I was at UC Santa Barbara, when I was going to school there, I did a lot of like recreational classes, and I knew a professor there, Amy Jameson, amazing professor, really love working with her. And she had a couple classes that I would go teach jump rope in. And one of them was it was a freshman class, intro to exercise science. And I would do a jump rope workout, which was basically, it was less of a workout, more of like 3 different stations where I would have them all go try different things. Right. Cause like, it was kind of hard to manage as one person, but I would do like a double dutch. I would do like a wheel or a 2-person 1 rope. And then I would do a single rope, those 3 stations. And on the double dutch, it was so funny because the second you get those ropes turning, you immediately learn about that person's personality, like immediately. And it was always
You have
fun.
to.
You have, because you see, like, are you like, do you aggressively want to get into it? Are you kind of apprehensive?
Yeah.
You know, do you hate it until all of a sudden you're good at it and then you love it? Like, you know, all these different things. Do you want to keep going no matter what? And you just want
Yeah.
to drive through until you're successful? Like all those different things.
Like Japan, like they are so fluent with as a team. It's insane. I love watching Japan do double dutch because they're professionals. They get paid, but it's amazing. Like they know what the next person's gonna do, and that's just incredible to me. Like they understand each other
Yeah.
as they're turning.
Yeah. It's not just a couple people coming together to do a thing. It's like they're not just there to turn the ropes. They are genuinely a team, like in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
Well, dude, this has been so good. I'm gonna cut it off here, but we are for sure doing a second round, and we're probably gonna start with double dutch next time and kind of go down the rabbit hole with that. But yeah, thank you for being on, for taking the time, and for just chatting about all this really good information and sharing so much insight into your journey and a lot of good ways to approach jump rope.
Yeah, I'm happy to, man. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for wasting my time.
There he is.
I do appreciate it. Thanks, man.
We got so far without an actual like troll, but I'm glad that you're closing it out strong.
I had to do it.
No, it's cool, dude. It's cool. That's what we do. That's our thing. That's your thing.
Yeah.
I'm just a conduit for you to be like that.
Got a PhD in it, so
there you go.
Okay.
Awesome, dude. I'll let you get back to your day, and we will be catching up for round 2 sometime.
Awesome. Sounds good.
What up? It's Nate. I'm back real quick just to say thanks for listening to this episode. It's really fun chatting with Grim. And, you know, like we talked about, there's still a huge lack of information out there on so many pieces of jump rope, speed step being one of the disciplines with the least amount of information. So if you know someone who might be interested in this episode for speed step or for any of the other things we talked about, please send it over to them, because it really does help get the word out about all the different ways people can jump rope. And if you're not yet done, you're still hungry for more jump rope stuff, you should really check out natekg.com/new. That's /NEW. That is a page on my website with links to all my new stuff that comes out, YouTube tutorials, more podcasts, Instagram combos, coaching, a link to sign up to my email newsletter, all of the things that I have going on to make your jump rope journey better. So definitely check that out. All right, that is it for today's episode. I hope you have a great rest of your morning, evening, lunch, dinner, breakfast, whatever time it is for you right now. All right, I'll see you on the next episode.